Hey, this is Dan Monroe on another missionary adventure, and today we come to you from Pall Mall, Tennessee, right near the Kentucky border. And those of you that like classic movies will remember the classic movie Sergeant York, which came out in 1941, played by Gary Cooper. It was almost a Hollywood documentary. At that time, Hollywood really didn't make movies like that, but it was about a real individual named Alvin York who grew up in this Wolf River Valley, a very remote area. He was born in 1887. This is Ranger Wells, who's going to help us out with a few questions today. But this is the home that Sergeant York lived in. And it was that movie that really launched him into more of a worldwide fame. But it was something that happened in actually I want to go back to 1915, where his life was radically changed. And what happened at that time in his life?
So for Alvin at that point, he'd be basically described as a little bit of a hellraiser. That's the best way to look at it. They try to depict that in the film as well as they can.
Yeah.
But in 1915, on New Year's Day of 1915, he will attend a revival at the old Methodist church here in the valley. And it would be hosted by the Methodist church, but it would be carried out by Reverend H.H. Russell. Reverend Russell was with the Church of Christ and Christian Union. It was a small denomination found sparsely in 3 states, still kind of the same way. And it was something that when he was listening to this revival, it just seemed to click for him. It made sense. And he would say it was like a bolt of lightning had struck his soul. So in the film, they put an actual bolt of lightning, and it was something that was easier for them to convey this radical change in who he had been, because it's easier for an audience to accept a near-death experience radically changing someone in an instant than it was essentially this epiphany moment.
Right. So Alvin York, his dad had died. He's responsible for raising his family, taking care of his brothers and sisters in this very remote part of Tennessee. And he becomes, like the Ranger said, a real hellraiser. And if you watch the movie, you'll see he was known for 2 famous things. He was known for being an excellent marksman. He was also known for being a heavy drinker and a hellraiser as well. So he has this encounter with Jesus Christ, gives his life to the Lord. Shortly after that, what is it, about 2 years later, that the United States gets involved in World War I, and he's drafted. And he's got a conundrum because he registers as a conscientious objector. So how does he deal with that?
So in a lot of the way it's kind of been viewed is, so in 1917, when we entered the war, U.S. declares war, this draft is put on. And we had a very small military at the time. We had about 220,000 men and women that consisted of the Army, Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard. That was everybody. And because of how the casualties toll had taken place over time, we realized we needed a lot of fighting personnel. And so we drafted over 4.5 million men in less than a year. And so Alvin's one of 110,000 Tennesseans called to service in World War I. And for Alvin, it was this aspect that he had been going down this new path for him where he's very much struggling with his own personal demons and struggling with not wanting to do harm, to take another life. And the whole aspect of being in the military, especially for combat infantry, was you're tasked with defeating your enemy. And so it's a little hard when you don't want to take their life. And so for Alvin, it is this kind of moral conundrum for him. And during this effort, he would write on his draft card, "No, I don't want to fight," because he wants to serve. And he would always say that later on in life. He wanted to serve, but his struggle with the aspect of taking a life. And so when he goes in, he's rejected on the status. They had used his religious beliefs as a part of his exemption, and he's rejected on that because the Church of Christ and Christian Union, which most of Alvin's congregation converts to in 1916, they here in the valley are pacifists. It's a part of their kind of doctrine here, but that is not a denomination-wide doctrine. And so it's not seen as an established doctrine within a religious institution. It's not like the Quakers, it's not like the Amish, and so it's very much this aspect that they reject that argument. Well, he's called into service, he's in the Army, he's at Camp Gordon down in Georgia, out of Chamblee, Georgia, and it's there that his mother and his cousin had continued petitioning this effort to get him exempted. And they would actually be successful in that endeavor. It takes time, but they're successful. And so when Alvin's called to his senior officers of Major Bucks and Captain Danforth, it was on the basis of if he signs this document, he can go home. Because he's essentially been granted this exemption if he signs off on it. But Alvin is still an individual who wants to serve, and so they debate with him for a number of days, and they debate him on the merits of his argument. Alvin's coming from this Christian philosophy background in regards to not wanting to take life, not wanting to fight, and at the same time his senior officers approach him with the same avenue, this aspect of all these very much devout religious individuals like those that came before him, like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, those who were founding fathers of the U.S., and this aspect that they had to square away their own religious beliefs and in regards to doctrine, in regards to what fighting and taking lives. And so for him, they would debate him on these merits, this idea if you do not have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. And so it is a part of this struggle. Well, they would grant him a 10-day leave, and they send him home so he can decide this question. He will famously go up upon the Yellow Doors, this rock outcropping that's on Black House Mountain.
Yeah, and if you've seen the movie, there's a part of the movie where he goes up to this hill, which is difficult to see with the camera right now, but it's just a hill right over here where you can see a rock outcropping, where he met with God for 3 days, fasted, prayed, and it was at that point that he felt like the Lord gave him the go-ahead that he could serve in the military, defend his country. And
he would say that it would be up there that God had told him that he would come home and this was a just fight.
Yeah.
And that was how he articulated. So for him, returning, fulfilling the service that he felt he needed to do, but also rectifying with him this moral conundrum that he had.
Right. Yeah, and without really getting into detail about this, because it's such an amazing story, and there's some great biographies that have been written about him, along with his own diaries the diary that you can read. But it was in October, I think it was October 1918, is that right?
Yes.
That he was in a battle in France. There was just an amazing firefight that went on. He led his men. By the end of the day, they had captured 133...
Of 132, there's 4 officers and 128 men.
German soldiers.
And it's... Careful. But
something flew into my ear.
It's all right, we can edit that. Yeah.
But so October 7th, 1918, Alvin's regiment and his division's been mobilized to outmaneuver German forces in the area. And as they're pushing through, they detach a 17-man patrol to outmaneuver these German machine gun positions that are pinning down the battalion as it's pushing west from Hill 223, west of Chateau Charry. And so as they're pushing through, they make this maneuver. They went from 17 men down to 8 standing. And so for them, it was this effort to accomplish, get back to lines. And through this operation, Alvin went from being one of the corporals in the unit to the acting senior NCO in the unit, with some of the NCOs having been injured and then incapacitated or killed. And so they go through this effort. And it begins this kind of snowball effect of collecting more prisoners. Alvin would always stress he was never alone, that if any of the other men in his unit that were there were in his shoes, in his position when the machine guns opened up on them, they could have accomplished the same thing. And that was one thing that always stayed with Alvin, even later on in life, that he was never alone, and it was this effort by his unit. In many ways, they try to depict that in the film, how that's perceived at the end when they do the joking statements, oh, he captured the whole German army, and it continues to snowball. One's like, he captured the Kaiser. Aspect of how, by word of mouth, it goes from him and the 8 men that are part of his unit to this one man capturing all these Germans. And, I do believe it kind of struck him in a way that he was never really comfortable with, that he would always say he was never alone.
Sure.
But it's 132 prisoners. During that action that it silenced, it's estimated to have silenced about 35 machine guns along that ridgeline.
Amazing.
And it allowed the 328th to achieve their objective that evening, because that battle continues on from 7 in the morning well into the evening, and by the evening time they are seizing a DeCalville rail line that's just west of the position that they were pushing. And that rail line was a part of their objective because it had been supplying fresh troops, resources, ammunition, supplies to the German units and elements in the area, part of the 2nd Landwehr, that had encircled a pocket of American troops who had been famously known as the Lost Battalion under Major Whittlesey in the 77th Infantry Division. And so for them, that was their objective. And though the pocket was liberated on October 7th, by October 8th, Alvin's unit does take their objective of that rail line at a heavy cost.
And out of that, from what happened those few days of fighting, he ended up being the highest decorated American soldier during the First World War.
I would say he is a highly decorated. He's not the most decorated American soldier of the war, but he is the most famous.
Yeah,
he is a household name when he comes home. And it's because of a newspaper article by George Petulio in the Saturday Evening Post, syndicated around the country, and it makes him a household name. So by the time he sets foot back in the United States in 1919, stepping off the USS Ohio in New York, that everyone knows his name. And he is famous at that point. Whether it was fame he wanted or not, he was famous.
Right. And so he's got the Medal of Honor. He comes back as a war hero, which was quite surprising to him. And he could have made millions of dollars by endorsing different products, because he immediately got hundreds of different offers from Hollywood to vaudeville, etc., endorsing different things. And instead he says, I can't use Uncle Sam's uniform to make money off of that. He comes back home. The people of Tennessee, over the next few years, they take up a collection. They do build this house for him. But what he does during the rest of his life is he uses his fame and notoriety to advance education within this valley and helping poor children to receive an education. He founded a Bible college. And I think what's amazing is if Alvin York hadn't had his experience with Jesus Christ at that Methodist church, which is just about a half mile, I think, right through the woods over here. We just visited that. If he hadn't had that lightning experience with God, then he may not have had any of this other stuff ever happen to him. And so I just want to close by saying, what is it that God's challenging you to do? Because I know a lot of people are watching where you feel like God's been calling you to do something. And I want to encourage you to be like an Alvin York, to be a man of humility, a woman of humility who will step out and just follow God for as long and as far as he will take you to accomplish great things for the kingdom of God. So until next time, this is Dan and Kathy Wonrow reminding you that it's worth it serving Jesus. We encourage you to subscribe to our the subscription button down below and watch some of our other YouTube videos as well and share them with friends. God bless you. Bye-bye.